back to BSides Austin. This is our mid-afternoon talk in Little Tex. Here in Little Tex, you're going to learn about rats without borders, moving your cheese, and let's all welcome Robert Neal.
All right, thanks, Chris. So yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for coming out to listen to the talk. Really appreciate it. So let's start off giving a little background on the talk here. And so here at the turn of the year, I set out with a somewhat unachievable goal of building a rat in every programming language I could find and get my hands on. I soon realized, though, in the middle of this effort, that even with no obfuscation and using like all of the common rat techniques and functionalities, the AV vendors weren't catching my malware, and I thought that was kind of interesting and scary at the same time. And so I thought it was interesting enough to put this talk together and present it to you guys. So hope you enjoy it. All right, so standard outline of the talk today. Actually, a tweet's scheduled to go out, and I think I have it set to 2:30, it might be 2:45. The slide deck, there will be a link to the slide deck, and not only slide deck, but the code. Obviously, most of you guys are probably here to get the code, right? So the slide deck and the code will be tweeted out at 2:30, 2:45. So I've spent the majority of my career supporting DoD, either like at NSA, so at NSA, I was finding vulnerabilities, writing exploits so that we could go find HVTs or high-value targets so the military could go kick doors in or go drop bombs on the bad guys, right? Then when I got into that, I went to USAA, so still supporting our military service members. And actually, any military in the room, former or current? Yeah, thank you guys, and gals, thank you. Appreciate it. So again, supporting DoD directly or indirectly. And with USAA, I actually led the red team. So I created and led the red team there at USAA. And over the years, while working at NSA and USAA, I was volunteering a lot of my time, mainly Christian organizations. So, churches obviously, but schools and colleges and things of that nature, just helping them with their cybersecurity. Because, nonprofits, they don't really have a ton of money in most cases. Unless you're like about the NFL, they think the NFL is a nonprofit, right? Isn't that wild? That's crazy. So this effort later became known as Penn Consultants, and the reason this is important is because this is kind of what got me involved in building these rats, right? Actually, I left USAA beginning of February, first week of February, so I'm doing that Penn Consultants gig, like full time now. Just trying to make that go. All right, that's probably all you care to know about me. Let's get into this. All right, so actually, I failed to mention earlier, if you guys have questions, it might be kind of hard for me to see me, or it might be hard for me to see you, but if you get my attention, you have questions in the middle, please feel free to stop me. So why? Why in the world did I do this? First, I did this because it was a challenge to myself, right? I like challenging myself, learning new things, and I probably knew 20 programming languages, but I wanted to know more. Secondly, I wanted to have more options for client engagements, right? I don't want to be always throwing a C# or C++ rat when I'm on client engagement, so I wanted variety. And as I already kind of mentioned, a byproduct, it wasn't even the main factor going in. A byproduct was, hey, I'm getting unbiased A/B testing out of this, right? Like, this isn't tied to any corporation that's getting kickbacks on the back end and swaying results, right? This is raw stuff. And again, at 2:45, you guys are going to see the code. You'll see what I mean. So, yeah, probably a lot of people ask you, like they ask me, which AV vendor is better? Which one's better at catching malware? And my common response is, or my typical response is, well, they all kind of suck, right? I mean, it's kind of like when you're voting for a politician, they all suck. Well, which one sucks less? That might be a better question. So, that's what we're going to explore in this talk, is which one sucks less? And not which one sucks less, but what could those AV vendors do to do better? So at the end of this talk, there's a lot of recommendations that I have to the AV vendors on hopefully what we can do better. Let's see, definitions. I just threw these up here just in case there's any question on what I'm calling a rat. So just remote access Trojan, right? And I use the term just AV, just a shorthand AV throughout this talk, and that's going to mean not just antivirus, but anti-malware or next-gen AV or whatever you want to call it, right? So, yeah. Okay, the approach. All right, so I'll give a high-level overview of the approach that I took. I built a rat to the same set of requirements in every language possible. Well, that's what I'm working towards. You're going to see I'm only about 21 in, I think. So same set of requirements, build a rat in every language from publicly available code. So I'll use someone else's rat if I can, right? Because it's simple, it's easy. Worst case scenario, I'll just copy and paste publicly available code, and then virus code scanning. Actually, I'm going to drill into the specifics of each of those steps now. So I started with the top 50 programming languages, as you see on GitHub. In the future, actually, I plan to expand this to all programming languages, not just on GitHub, but GitLab, Bitbucket, you name it, right? Based on some research I did, it looks like there's probably going to be over 700 languages. And you're going to see some examples in a little bit, but some of those languages, it's not going to be possible for me to build a rat in. But my kind of 5-year goal, 10-year goal, whatever you want to call it, is to have, you know, as many of the 700 languages, have a rat in as many of the 700 languages as possible. Yeah, and not to mention, in addition to those roughly 700 that's present day, new languages are being added. You know, every couple of months it seems like a new language is coming out, right? So I plan to stay on top of that as well. All right, the rat requirements. So I tried to keep the requirements for the rats as simple as possible for time's sake, you know, like before. Plus, when I'm building and testing malware against a specific AV product or small set of AV products, I find that the features that I have as requirements here are the ones that typically will flag the AV product or on the AV product if they're going to flag at all. So things like HTTP GET, a post, running a Windows or Linux like a shell command, right? I mean, that's a big one. Depending on how the AV vendor is scoring or whatever, that one normally gets a pretty high score. So I took these small set of requirements that I've found over the years that will give a pretty good indication if AV is ever going to flag it as evil. Yeah, I'll step through those. So the first one's execution, obviously. You know, if it doesn't run, is it really a threat? Like, I don't think it would be, right? Once it executes, you know, go into a loop and do, again, this is simplistic, but do an HTTP GET to a shady Russian server. Try to give the benefit of the doubt to the AV vendors, because some AV vendors have threat intel and looking for, you know, maybe Chinese-based or Russian-based malware servers. So Russian C2 server, go out, grab a command, execute the command, grab standard error, standard out, and HTTP post that standard error and standard out back to the same C2 server, and then sleep for 5 seconds. Interestingly enough, sometimes the sleep command flags high enough on you know, a lot of AV solutions to actually tip it off as evil. And then, you know, loop to infinity, right? So in some languages, I was not able to follow this exact model. One example that you'll see is PHP. You know, PHP is really not like a concept of execution, right? It's more like a rendering type thing. So in those situations, I created a backdoor instead of a rat. And again, you're going to see that here in just a second. As far as building the rat, as I mentioned earlier on, I tried to acquire the full rat code when possible. If not, I tried to find the functionalities. So the HTTP GET, for example, I try to copy and paste that straight from like a GET repo somewhere. Because AV vendors have theoretically trained their models on, well, hopefully they've trained their models on at least the malware kits and things that are out there. And you would hope they've trained on even those slices or whatever you want to call it, those functionalities as well. When that wasn't possible, you know, I ended up having to write some code. I probably didn't write a whole lot of my own code, certainly modifications, but, and you guys, you know, at the end of this talk, you'll see details of that. All right, so Windows. I targeted Windows when possible, because again, in my experience, AV vendors, they're probably 95% trained on Windows malware, maybe more, right? And like 5% of what they do is in the Linux and Mac space. They're not there yet. I guess, you know, maybe because of the threat model or whatever it is, right? Plus, I mean, Windows is the, certainly more, there's a higher number of Windows boxes in like a corporate environment, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But if the particular language or rat would not run in Windows, I use Mac OS next, and then followed by Linux. So you're going to see some examples there. Another requirement is no special server-side code. Again, like I said, what, twice now already? Maybe 3 times now? Because I wanted to keep this super simple. I didn't want to spend like a week on each language, right? So on the server side, that means I had a very simple flat file that had my command in it, that get request would go retrieve, and when it pushed the results back, it was just a simple one-line PHP script or page that would take the HTTP post and write it to a flat file. And it's worth mentioning, I guess the second time, is no obfuscation. I did no sort of packing or obfuscation or encryption of the binary whatsoever. This is all copy and paste code, compiled with the minimal number of parameters, just to ensure no packing or anything was taking place. All right, A/B testing. So another thing that's worth mentioning. So I used VirusTotal to scan these rats. In reality, I would have wanted to use the actual solutions installed, right? Because everyone knows that what's up on VirusTotal isn't necessarily 100% representative, right? But let me just ask you guys a question. How many people in the room have all 70 A/B solutions installed in your lab? Like, no one, right? Like, I can only think of one past employer I had that installed, and I certainly don't have, right? But the truth is, VirusTotal is fairly representative. If there's any, red teamers and pen testers in the room, you understand what I'm saying, right? I mean, it's like a 99% overlap. Occasionally there's some differences, but if anything, what I find is that the AV vendors, the solutions they have integrated into VirusTotal are a lot of times configured to the highest settings that you would never see in a corporate environment, like with one of your client environments, because the noise would be too great, right? And I just threw an example up here. In some languages, you can literally throw together a hello world and throw it up, and an AV vendor will flag on it. That's how sensitive it is. So if anything, VirusTotal may actually flag more often than you would down like on a client engagement, for example. The other comment I want to make is the biggest disadvantage I can see to AV vendors, especially these next-gen AV vendors, is a lot of your CrowdStrikes, your Cylance, I'm going to miss some, but so some of these more modern solutions have things like EDRs and stuff that are part of the suite. So it's more than just traditional AV, if you will. It's EDRs and behavior type solutions as well. So if anything's different, or if the AV vendor would catch it in a regular environment, a customer environment, or client environment, that might account for the difference there. Results. All right, so this is probably what everyone's been waiting for, right? Well, this and the code, but this is the first part everyone's probably been waiting for, is I'm going to single step through each graph that I've created so far and show you guys how I did against VirusTotal. And then we're going to talk about it. So the first graph, JavaScript. So this one actually surprised me a little bit. Surprised me in the sense that so many AV engines detected my evil JavaScript rat. At the same time, I'm not going to go out immediately and go buy QuickHeal. I've never even heard of QuickHeal before. Does anyone in the room have maybe it's like even a vendor from QuickHeal, and I'm offending someone right now. But QuickHeal, I don't know. But anyway, great. Great on these vendors, right? The second one was Java. Actually, a question for everyone in the room. How many people have Java installed on all of your workstations, all of your endpoints in your environment? Raise your hand. Oh, one? Oh, two? Did I see two? Three. Sorry, buddy. So
security tools require Java.
Yes, this is true. So I say that because, holy crap, no obfuscation, right? And this is not being flagged by any AV vendor. And I'll say, in my 5 years of red teaming at USAA, I don't think I ever created a jar or Java-based piece of malware that got detected with any AV vendor that we were using anyway. So I think this is pretty representative and scary at the same time. All right, so Java, Python. This is another one that's a little bit concerning, right? So again, I'll ask the question, how many people have Python installed in your environment, especially Mac and Linux?
Mac by default,
Yeah, Mac by default. Most Linux distros, in fact, maybe all Linux, all primary Linux, or all main Linux distros probably have it by default. Anyone I've ever messed with, Red Hat, Debian, I think all of them do, right? But even in the Windows world, I know client engagements I go on, a lot of people have Python installed on at least like developer boxes and stuff like that, and the data scientist boxes and stuff of that nature. So yeah, this is, again, this is kind of concerning. Of course, this is script-based, so I made a comment earlier, potentially some of these AV vendors that did not flag this as evil, maybe would have in an actual environment had you purchased their entire suite. So let's say, I'm not trying to like promote any vendor here, but just like CrowdStrike or something like that. I just know those are one of the vendors that has like 10 products in their suite, right? What's that?
You tried Perl by chance? AC?
No, in this case I did not. When I've been red teaming, I have absolutely done that before, using like what CX Freeze I think was a primary, and PyDX. Yep, exactly. Yeah, actually, in Fast Employer, we probably ran with a Python based wrap for probably 2 years. That was PyDX, well, it was CX Freeze, but yeah, exactly. And of course, Dave Kennedy's Trevor C2. Anyone ever heard of that? Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this stuff's out there. The fact that AV vendors are not catching it is a little bit scary. So great news for Red Team though. CSS, like. I spent some time on this, researching and trying to figure out a way. Is there any way to get actual execution and do things like to run a system shell command and things of this nature? I couldn't figure out anything. If anyone in the room knows of something I'm missing, certainly grab me afterwards. I would love to know if it is possible to kind of weaponize CSS. PHP, I mentioned this before. PHP, the concept of actual execution and looping and things of that nature without actually pulling up the page in a browser or a user rendering it. Other than that situation, that didn't really make sense here, so I created a backdoor with this. And as you see, a few AV vendors actually flagged it as evil. So good, again, good on them. Ruby. Red teams, if you guys are going after like Mac OS, like Ruby, I could be wrong, but I think Ruby has been installed by default on Mac OS for years, right? Anyone correct me on that if I'm wrong? It's certainly there now by default, right? And in some cases, your Linux service and things of that nature may have Ruby on it. So this is great. Certainly for Mac OS, this is going to be great. And as a bonus, anything script-based in Mac will. I want to use the word bypass gatekeeper, but gatekeeper's not even concerned with scripts, right? C++. This one actually surprised me a little bit. So I was surprised it wasn't higher. So C++, at least in my experience, maybe it's because of the code I was writing, flags pretty easily, like malware flags pretty easily written in C++. So maybe it's just something I've been doing over the years, and the particular examples that I used here were just, AV was fine with it, right? And not surprising to see these two vendors. Again, this is not an endorsement whatsoever of any vendors, but I mean, it's not surprising to see these two vendors here because certainly in the like NSS Labs and some other independent reviews and stuff like this, these vendors are in the top, let's call it the top 5 anyway. Bash shell. So shell scripts have been something I've used for, gosh man, as long as I can remember, right? Especially when you jump on like a Linux server or something like that, because what AV vendor flags on scripts in general, much less bash. So again, great choice for red teams going after Linux, but also Mac. So Mac, full bash scripts running Mac as well. Obviously the syntax is slightly different for some things, but for the most part, your curls and your gets and all that kind of stuff, that's the same across Linux and Mac. Also perfect for actually bypassing Gatekeeper. So for those that don't know, first of all, does anyone not know what Gatekeeper is in Mac OS? It's kind of like a red team tester's nightmare, right? So Gatekeeper is basically metadata that gets set on a executable, a binary, when it gets downloaded through, let's say, Safari, through the browser. When it gets stored on disk, there's metadata that's set on that file that says it's untrusted. And unless that binary is signed, Gatekeeper will not, the default settings of Gatekeeper will not allow that to run unless it's signed. But if you download that same executable using, let's say, Perl through a bash script, that metadata never gets set. So you can immediately run that executable and Gatekeeper is completely oblivious to it. It's awesome. So, red team tip. So C#, this one actually made me question whether VirusTool was working this day. Because again, in past employers, C# is, everyone's got their favorite language. This is one of my favorite languages because it's easy to program in. But at the same time, so many of the AD solutions flag, at least my experience, flag on C# based malware. Not just C#, but I would say pretty much anything that's Visual Studio compiled. Most of your modern AD solutions do a pretty good job of detecting malware. But again, with this sample, the results are what they are. Objective-C, so some Mac OS malware. Actually, I guess technically you can run Objective-C compiled binaries on all three platforms, I believe, Windows, Linux, and Mac. At least when I think of Objective-C, I think of Mac OS. Yeah, so other than one of many techniques, I mentioned one technique to get by Gatekeeper earlier. There's certainly other bypass techniques for Gatekeeper, including things like tricking the user to go disable Gatekeeper settings and things of that nature. Of course, the later versions, the last version or two of Mac OS, might be 2 versions ago now, Apple's certainly making it harder for a user to go in and disable Gatekeeper. In fact, I think the latest version, you have to actually go in and like modify like a config file on disk or something crazy, right? R. This one's pretty cool. I had never really messed with R or even seen R coding before. I guess question, any data scientists in the room that have used R? None? There are zero people that have used R? One?
Used R, but I'm not a data scientist.
Oh, okay. That make friends with this guy still.
No.
Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. So, like AI and ML and all that crap, like that's all that jazz, right? That's like the new thing. All right. And I guess if there are any data scientists in the room that didn't raise your hands, the only reason we make fun of data scientists and data analytics is because we don't understand it, because you guys are way smarter than us. But you guys are great. But I would say make friends with your data scientists at work, right? Have them create and this, I'm talking to red teamers, have your data scientists create like a really sweet and fully functioning, data analytic in R, and then drop a backdoor in it, drop a rat in it, right? And you're gonna have like 100%. You'll probably have 100% success rate at targeting your environment, especially your other data scientists. All right, Vim scripting. Of all the years I've used Vim, like even all the way back to like college years and stuff, I have never created a Vim script before. But anyway, I spent some time on this, and I didn't really see a direct way for Vim scripting to perform gets and posts and things of that nature. You can certainly call shell commands and bash and things from within Vim or from within Vim scripting. But then why not just have a bash script, right? And if it's like before, if I've missed something here and someone in the room knows something that I've missed, please come grab me afterwards and let me know what I missed. But anyway, I ended up just skipping this one. Go. All right, so Go, up until, so the Python rat that I used for the first couple of years when I was red teaming, that ended up getting burned by a lot of AV vendors, and I couldn't make enough changes and keep up with AV vendors to keep it from getting flagged, so I switched to Go. So I've been using Go for the last couple of years, maybe 3 years now. And as of BSides San Antonio, none of my Go malware had ever got flagged by any AV vendor. So this was what, August? I think it was like August of last year. Actually, anyone in the room, BSides San Antonio? Was it August?
June.
Was it June? Oh my gosh. Okay, thank you. So as of June of last year, I had found no AV solutions that were flagging on equal go binaries, but when I ran this testing earlier this year, Cylance is flagging it as unsafe, so awesome. Perl. So like Python and Java, I bet, half the people in the room, if not more, you probably have Perl on all of your non-Windows boxes. Because again, it's one of those things that should be installed, or most likely installed by default on all Mac OS and Linux boxes. So, yeah, great against Linux and Mac. CoffeeScript. I've been out of web development for long enough. I never actually heard of CoffeeScript. Maybe I was just out of it. But what I found in my research is CoffeeScript transcompiles into JavaScript. So since I already had a JavaScript rat, I didn't really see the point in kind of wasting time or spending time on this, so I ended up skipping this one. Text. Text is more of, and these are all in order, in case you guys didn't realize. I went to like the GitHub top 50, I don't know if I mentioned this before. GitHub top 50, I just pluck them off in order, right? Text was the next one on the list, but it's more of a font or a typeset, right? So, kind of like CSS in the sense that there's really no execution that you can gain with text. So I ended up skipping this one. Good old PowerShell. So this is another one that you just ask yourself, what the heck are the vendors doing, right? Like PowerShell has been around for years. Red teamers, pen testers, attackers, anyone on the red side has been using PowerShell for years. There's hundreds, maybe thousands of post-exploitation kits and scripts and things of this nature. I mean, Dave Kennedy alone probably has 300 of these, right? Like, I don't understand why AV vendors still are not catching up and flagging on evil PowerShell, but it is what it is. Oh, and with PowerShell Core now, which is pretty cool. Everyone familiar with PowerShell Core? Like, this is OS agnostic now. And assuming you have PowerShell Core installed, and PowerShell now runs on Linux and Mac as well. Visual Basic, the only thing I've been using on the red side for longer than PowerShell for evil code is Visual Basic. Like, especially in like, Office documents, macros, things of that nature, more of the VBA side, but still Visual Basic and running it through, C-script or W-script or things of this nature, right? And again, I asked the question, like, what are the AV vendors doing? Why are they not flagging on this stuff yet? Swift. So this is the only one I got frustrated on, and this is the only one I probably spent more than like an hour or two on. I probably spent 8 hours plus on Swift. For those that don't know, Swift is Mac OS, right? So like I was using Xcode in Mac OS and like Alamo Fire, like third-party plugins. Some of you guys may know what I'm talking about. I farted around with that for an entire day and then some, and I could not get a rat working in Swift yet. So I did skip this one. I plan on coming back to it, and I don't know. Like for a company, Apple, that prides itself on stuff just working, in my opinion, their dev environment needs some work. ActionScript. So ActionScript, specifically version 3, this is the language behind Flash. So one interesting thing, in case you don't know, this, again, red teamers, pen testers, yes, Flash can run in your browser, hosted externally, have a user pull it up in a browser, but of course you're very limited. It's in a sandbox environment. You can't access the file system, for example. You can't run system level commands. There's other things, but those are the primary ones. Let's see if I can. That's live. So Linux procs unless you're presenting. Cool. All right. But for those that don't know, AIR, which is Adobe Integrated Runtime, allows you to actually run the SWF file independent of the browser. Like you would an executable or any other binary, right? So this is awesome. You can drop your SWF file in a web cache directory, so it blends in, right? And then run it with AIR and not be in that sandbox environment and have full access to the operating system. And obviously, no need for, obviously you're not going to have antivirus flagging evil on your flash. All right, AppleScript. I think this is actually the last one I have for today. AppleScript, obviously Mac OS. This one is great to get initial access. When I'm hitting back, this is probably one of my first go-tos. The reason being is because by default install of Mac OS, for like as long as I can remember, even the current versions, number one, no gatekeeper, right? Because it's a script, you don't have to worry about gatekeeper. And when the user downloads and opens this, it automatically opens up in the script editor. So all you have to do is convince the user to click the run button. So kind of like Office macros, right? You have to get the user to open the document, obviously, but then you just have to get the user to enable the macros. This is kind of the Mac OS version of that in my mind. That's how I think of it. All right, raw results. Actually, first of all, let me summarize the results for you guys and just kind of show you how all the AV vendors did. First, we'll talk about the true positives. This is where AV called it evil, and it was evil, of course. It was a working rat. The winner here, with a whopping 2 detections out of 16, is Cylance. So in one way, I would say good on them. In another way, it's like, really? You just go to 14, okay? But I mean, it gets worse, right? Or better from a rating perspective, depending on how you're looking at this. These vendors that I have listed here only detected 1 sample. So, there you go, right? Like, back to my initial point, AV kind of sucks, right? Again, and remember, there's no obfuscation with these rats. No obfuscation, copy and paste evil code, stuff that you find publicly available. This is not custom stuff. 95% of it anyway is not custom code. And I guess it was worth mentioning the other 40 or so vendors, no detections whatsoever, 0 detections. All right, next one, false negatives. So this is where the AV vendor definitively stated this is not evil, this is clean, it's benign. So not only is the solution failing to detect evil and call it evil, it's saying, oh no, I know for sure that this is fine. Now obviously, we use security professionals in the room. When AV tells us it's clean, we don't take its word, we know better. But I mean, your average user, if AV says it's clean, he assumes it's clean, right? And the other thing I wanted to point out is you'll notice that I hate the word, but the next gen AV vendors, right, like your Cylance, your Endgame, your CrowdStrike, stuff like that, you'll notice that they're real careful to not call something clean if they don't know. So traditional AV has a green or red, whereas I guess the later vendors have learned the lesson and they have a red, yes, it's definitely bad, green, it's definitely good, and then most of it falls out in the middle, like we don't know. All right, this one is not implemented. So this one is interesting because back in the day, like 10 years ago, let's say, AV scanned all files that got pulled down on disk or opened on disk, whichever way it was doing it, or in some cases it would do it on both write and read. The modern AV products, though, they only scan what they know they can detect on. So if they know that they can't detect evil PowerShell, let's say, they don't even waste their time, the processing cycles, or the resources to even try to scan PowerShell. So I mean, they're trying to be more efficient and more cognizant of the resources that might impact the user, right? So for 9 of the samples, these vendors here, these AV solutions here, didn't even process my file. Now it could be that the VirusTotal integration had something to do with it, like maybe something on the VirusTotal side, or just something not being exposed on the. And I don't claim to know exactly how everything is set up, but I'm assuming that a lot of these are, the vendor probably has an API set up somewhere, and VirusTotal has an API key, and it's actually pushing it to the vendor site. Or maybe the vendor has actually installed something in VirusTotal's or Google's infrastructure. I really don't know how that works. But the point is that, and just to be fair, it might be something with that integration that's broken as to the reason why 9 of the samples were not scanned by these vendors. But it could also be that they just don't support the file types. So I did a little bit of research, and these are from 4 of the vendors. Silence, CrowdStrike, gosh, I don't remember who the other two were. I can just see those two here. These were 4 of those vendors, though, that I just showed you. These 4 vendors on their website, on their spec sheets, literally state that they only scan these file types and nothing else. So, like, for example, Silence only scans PEs. And it literally says, or it gives examples, executables and DLLs, right? And the other ones aren't a whole lot better. So, red team. This is what I would say to you, and pen testers, right? Anyone on the red side. If you, in your environment or in your client's environment, however that looks, once you enumerate their security stack, go and pull these white papers, these spec papers, or install this in the lab and do testing, right? If the AV vendor doesn't even scan the file type, like try to find those file types that you can weaponize that the AV vendor doesn't scan, and there's like a 100% chance that your malware will never get caught. All right, so speaking of red team, I'm going to apply this talk to 3 different groups of people in the room now. Then the first one I'm going to start with is red team. Actually, how many red teamers do we have in the room? Again, red team at your organization, pen tester, pen testing firm, anyone in the room on the red side? One person? So this is for you. So first of all the source code is going to be available probably like in 5 minutes if the tweet hasn't already went out. All the source code that I've talked about today will be available. So be on the lookout for that. Also, I think I can add the link to the B-side schedule, like when you guys went to bsidesATX.com or .org, whatever it is, that schedule for this talk. I think I can drop the link there, and I'll get that done today. But I guess the most important part is do not use this as is, and here's the reason. First of all, the code's a mess. Like, I didn't spend a lot of time almost to this, right? There's no comments, there's no instructions, there's no error catching, there's lots of like debug, like here 1, here 2, here 3 lines, so you're going to want to clean all that kind of stuff up. But the most important reason I say don't use this as is because I did not put encryption in any of this. So you'll need to add that functionality, obviously, to make sure that your commands coming down and your exfil going out is all encrypted. Like unencrypted is fine maybe for like, POCs or even your first stage loaders, but everything else has to be encrypted. Actually, I'll ask this question. This is one I asked, I think I've probably asked it every talk I've ever given. Who knows what, I hope you know, what is red team's primary purpose? Who knows? What's that?
Depends who you ask.
To get caught, and what was the other one?
I said it depends who you ask.
Okay, what's your opinion?
Pen tester doesn't want to get caught.
Right?
My thought being blue teamer is their goal is to make me better. And I think they fail miserably.
You just hit on it. Red team's primary, in my mind, my opinion, and I think most of the industry would agree, most red teamers in the industry would agree, is we're trying to make blue team better, right? We're not trying to, we're not trying to beat you all the time, right? If we don't make you better, what's the point? We're just out having fun and breaking stuff, right? Like, if blue team doesn't get stronger because of what we're doing and better, we fail, right? And so that's why I make this comment about the encryption, right? If you're like sending down commands, or especially if you're like exfilling sensitive data out of your client environment or out of your corporate environment and it's unencrypted, especially if a third party intercepts that, you literally just cause a data breach. The red team literally just caused a data breach for your organization if you didn't have that encrypted. So just want you to stop and think about that. Like, that runs counter to everything red team is supposed to do. All right, so I think I kind of went on that. You got that. I see you shaking. Thank you. All right, AV vendors. By chance, anyone in the room, AV vendor, or worked for an AV vendor, or have in the past? No one? What? Oh, nice. Thanks. So AV vendors, your slide is on. There we go. All right, so in my let's say opinion, based on my red teaming and pen testing experience, right? An AV solution really needs to be doing these 5 things to be effective. And when I say effective, to catch me and stop me, or at least detect on me, right? Or alert on me, right? A minimum alert on me, if not stop me. And that's static analysis, dynamic analysis, behavioral analysis, crowdsourced threat intel and sandboxing. Crowdsourced threat intel, so like before I mentioned that all of my C2 traffic was to a shady Russian server for the fact of I'm trying to determine which AV vendors are, trying to detect on that kind of stuff, right? And I know what you're saying. You might be saying, well, your particular company may do this one thing really well, or, CrowdStrike, Cylance, Next Game, whatever, might do this one thing really well, and I would probably agree with you, right? All of at least the top 5 or top 5 or top 10 AV vendors, they do at least one thing really well. It's kind of their bread and butter. And they have probably like dozens of patents for it and things of this nature, right? But again, it's super trivial to bypass any one of these. So if you're only doing one of them, it's easy for me to bypass it. For example, if you're only doing static analysis, then all I have to do is make sure my code's packed and obfuscated with a custom obfuscator that you've never seen before. Because maybe you're flagging on the obfuscator I use because I used a well-known one, but if I create my own, which is super simple, it takes 5-10 minutes for me to do that, right? You no longer detect, I bypass your primary functionality or your primary detection method. And maybe the AV vendor's even doing 2 things, but still it's the same thing. If you're doing 2 things, it's a little harder for me, but I'm still going to bypass it. If you're doing all 5 of these, I see no way that I would be able to bypass you. So, and clients shouldn't have to do this either, right? This is another thing that kind of irks me a little bit when I'm talking to an AV vendor is, oh, well, we do this, we do X really well, but you're going to need to buy this other solution, maybe even from another vendor, or do it on your own to catch or to provide this other functionality, which I would say baloney, right? I mean, I'm paying you like millions of dollars or tens of millions, depending on the size of your organization, right? Like, you need to be doing this. AV vendors, in my mind, also need to do a better job on training on publicly available code. So this is another thing that kind of ticks me off is when well, first of all, anyone in the room, have y'all ever submitted a malware sample to an AV vendor and said, hey, you're not flagging on this one? And yeah, a lot of people, right? How many times has the AV vendor came back and said, oh, well, we don't really see that in the wild, so we're not going to like train our models on it, right? Have you ever had that? Am I the only one who said that? Oh, I see one head there. Yeah. Does that not drive you nuts? Like, seriously? Like, it's evil. Like, let's not worry about it's not in the wild yet. Let's go ahead and flag on it. So, yeah, vendors need to do a better job there. Another tip to vendors, low false positive rates, right? I've seen AV solutions that are, yes, they do a better job at flagging on my malware that I'm creating, but at the same time, they have hundreds or thousands of false positive alerts per day. So it's kind of like the boy that cried wolf, right? Like, no one believes your product anymore when it says it's evil. Also, client-side custom signatures. This is another thing that just makes me mad. I've literally sit across the table with AV vendors before and said, hey, do you have your product open in such a way that I can drop in a custom signature or model or rule or whatever it is that you're using, only to have them tell me, oh, it's super complicated, you wouldn't be able to understand. Like, really? Like, I've known you for 5 minutes and you just call me an idiot. Like, you just, like, really? Like, don't do that, right? There are a lot of smart people in the environment, even smarter than the people you have working for your organization. Don't underestimate what your clients can do, in some cases. All right, I think I've hit on AV vendors pretty good. So Blue Team. So what can Blue Team do? Obviously, better selection of AV, right? If the AV solution you're looking at only scans binary file types, and your threat model includes things like script-based malware as well, like, choose a different AV vendor, right? Application whitelisting. Like, probably everyone in the room has said this themselves, or at least heard it. Like, really? Like, for anyone in the room doing 100% application whitelisting in your environment? Does anyone? One person? Nice job. Hey, Brown? Right? What does the rest of us know? That is super hard, right? Is it not super hard to get to that point? Or maybe it wasn't for you?
I don't use the laptop, it literally is for mail and,
Oh, so it's one box?
That's it.
Oh, that's
No, it's the
pretty
entire
cool.
environment.
Oh, okay, nice, nice, nice.
Thousands of systems.
Nice. Well, for most of us, most of the environments we're coming from, environments I've been in, like application whitelisting, that's like a pipe dream, right? Like really, like, we're never gonna get to that point. What I would say to that is, you can actually get to that point, or at least close to it. Start off with something like PowerShell, right? Start off baseline all the PowerShell activity in your environment, alert on anomalies, baseline, whitelist. Once it gets quiet enough and flatlines enough, flip that into block mode and then move on to Python and then move on to Perl. Do it one application at a time. Before you know it, it might take a few years depending on the size of your organization, but before you know it, you'll have application whitelisting. And that's really the best solution to prevent me. Yes.
Since we're on the blue team side, I'm a blue teamer, this does not surprise me at all. And I actually wouldn't expect the AVs to catch pretty much what you do, because I don't believe that's what they're written for.
Okay.
Okay, that aside, one of the things that's a dead giveaway, assuming you're in user space executing these, if that's where you're starting, is that an assumption?
Right. Right.
Then just monitoring execution of user space and the combination of things you do are going to trigger a whole bunch of more EDRs for sure.
Right.
Not ADs, but EDRs, because it's a combination of the totals, right?
Exactly.
So in the detection space, I would really recommend, A, if it's user space, and you start there as an assumption, then if you monitor executions in user space, you're gonna catch every one of these attacks.
Most of them. I would say most of them. I still bypass EDR solutions every day too, but yeah, I
I'm
absolutely.
not talking EDR, I'm just talking execution in general. I watch executions of Ox. Let's just say with process command line,
Right.
4688 Windows, and I'm just watching cuser splat.exe. I'm gonna catch everything you did there, because you gotta launch the engine, it's gonna trigger your C.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Yep. Good, thanks for that feedback.
That's been your slide.
Yes, I'll get that added. And I'll quote you. Let's see, I think we're running out of time here. So the future, again, I plan to get through all 700 languages, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. In conclusion, AV solutions that only perform, I already mentioned this, AV solutions that only perform one or even just two techniques, they're not gonna get the job done, right? So that's the takeaway I want you to have here. All right, so that's it. So hey, thanks again everyone for coming out, really appreciate it. Thank you, Pierce, and everyone at BSides Austin that made this possible, all the volunteers. Actually, have you guys enjoyed BSides Austin? Can we give it up? And of course, I have to thank my family that puts up with me, and actually my son's here today. He's helping. He actually created the slide deck and the theme and all that kind of stuff, and he helps me out a lot. So glad.